If you guys are chronically online like me, you may have heard about a little manga called Drama Queen. Upon its release a year or two ago, it prompted a massive internet firestorm to break out, with people alleging that the manga promoted anti-immigrant sentiments and xenophobia. And honestly, looking at the plot, it's not hard to see why. Drama Queen is a science fiction manga about a world in which aliens made contact with humankind, and ended up saving us from a massive meteor. In the aftermath of this event, these aliens start migrating to Earth and attempting to integrate with human society. Meanwhile, we follow two main characters, Nomomoto and Kitami, who both resent the aliens for the privileges they receive from saving their planet. The pair eventually snap and start killing the aliens en masse, openly stating that they don't see the aliens as humans and want them out of their town. So it's not hard to see where this manga's bad reputation came from. Its rhetoric brought forth a wide array of responses, with some individuals praising the manga for its bravery, and others calling to openly boycott the author for their sentiments. But what if I told you that pretty much everyone was wrong about this manga? Despite the overt connections between this manga's rhetoric and many anti-immigrant talking points, as of the most recent chapter, I think Drama Queen has more than proved that it doesn't actually want to tell a pro-xenophobia story. In fact, the truth seems to be closer to the opposite. Drama Queen's entire message is about the dangers of this type of discrimination, and the types of toxic mindsets that cause this type of hatred. Now, this message is most evident through the most recent chapters of Drama Queen. But frankly, I think that the writing has been on the wall from the very start. Even in the very first chapter of this manga, I think there are a number of signs that point to this manga being a lot more reasonable than it first appears. When this manga came out, I think a lot of people forgot that Drama Queen is very openly a dark comedy, and one of the main selling points of a dark comedy is their ability to draw critiques through absurdity. A dark comedy series will show something that is so absurd and disturbing that it almost acts as a shock to your system. And the point usually isn't that this absurdity is being condoned or promoted. It's most often that a dark comedy series will use humor in order to show how unreasonable these mindsets are. In Drama Queen, the main characters attempt to get rid of an alien's body, and learn that Nomomoto finds their flesh delicious. She gets hooked on the flavor to the point that she literally goes crazy for their meat, and asks Kitami to hunt the aliens non-stop in order to feed her. This is clearly such an absurd and disturbing aspect of the story. These aliens are fully sentient creatures, and yet they're somehow dehumanized by Nomomoto and Kitami to a point that the former can eat them in droves without a second thought. At least to me, this is clearly an example of a critique through absurdity. The author isn't condoning cannibalism or something, they're showing how ridiculous it is for Nomomoto and Kitami to treat the aliens as a cheap snack when they're a fully intelligent race. And through this clearly insane situation, they're also critiquing similar trains of thought that dehumanize certain people just because of a surface level difference or country of origin. But I can definitely understand how this flew under some people's radars, since this type of storytelling can be really tempting to take at face value. But looking a bit deeper at the author's probable intentions, I think there were hints to their true ideologies this entire time. And that's not the only aspect of Drama Queen that I think people overlooked in their anger towards the story. I believe that when you look at the actual identities of the aliens in Drama Queen, the manga starts to feel a bit more like a story about anti-colonialism rather than xenophobia. The main reason that Kitami and Nomomoto have such deep-seated resentment against the aliens is because of the preferential treatment they often receive. This comes in many forms, from getting free stuff at stores all the way to getting let off for violent and awful crimes. For example, Kitami's entire family is killed in a hit and run, but because the perpetrator was an alien, their identity is anonymized and they don't receive any punishment for their crime. On top of that, the aliens are shown to frequently occupy positions of power within human society. They get inserted into managerial roles and are free to mistreat their human underlings however they please. Finally, their population within human cities keeps on increasing at an uncontrollable rate. With all of those details combined, the power the aliens hold, the benefits they receive, and their increasing population, it starts to seem like the aliens in Drama Queen are meant to represent a dominant colonizing force. If you see the aliens and their settlement of Earth as more of a colonization than a peaceful assimilation, it pretty significantly changes the message of the story. There are a lot of nuances in the difference between anti-colonial sentiments and xenophobia, but that may be a bit outside the scope of this video. But broadly, the biggest difference comes down to power. In terms of xenophobia, it usually boils down to a native incumbent identity exerting power over and otherwise acting cruel to an immigrant population. The power in this situation usually lies with the natives, who are using their privileges in order to hurt people they consider as foreign. In contrast, anti-colonial sentiments are pretty much the opposite. There will be some native population that's indigenous to a certain place and a colonizing force that seeks to forcibly settle this land. In this situation, the power usually lies with the colonizers, who will use whatever tactics they can in order to marginalize the people that were native to that area. In response, the indigenous people will likely start to resent the colonizing force and lash out against them. Making a very broad generalization, anti-colonial sentiments are usually seen as progressive since they prioritize protecting a mistreated native population, while xenophobic sentiments are often conservative, since they prefer to protect the prevailing cultural identity even at the cost of immigrants. Getting back to Drama Queen, with how the aliens are presented in this manga, it seems like the author is more interested in expressing an anti-colonial message rather than a xenophobic one, which can be seen through the balance of power, where the aliens are given extreme privilege and often lord their power over the native humans. Once again though, this isn't anything close to an exact science. It can fully be argued that the aliens are being derided for something that comes down to their innate cultural identity, and that in trying to drive them out of their home, Kitami and Nomomoto are expressing racist or xenophobic ideologies. But I do think that this is something that should be up for debate and that wasn't really considered when this manga was first released. It's a lot more eye-catching of a story to talk about how the manga could be hawking conservative talking points, rather than considering any of the possible alternatives. But regardless of the original controversy, I think that Drama Queen has made its stance more than clear in its more recent chapters. As Drama Queen went on, it started to become more and more open with its true intentions. In one of the earlier chapters, we get introduced to two new characters, Iglaskar and Backbone, who run a business where they are contracted to kill aliens. And it's pretty clear from the get-go that both of them are really awful people. Iglaskar is an extremely petty man whose hobby is making other people angry. And although he doesn't really have a grudge against the aliens, he has no problem cutting them down for a quick buck. Backbone, on the other hand, is a full-on sociopath who didn't bat an eye when her parents were killed by Iglaskar, instead choosing to follow him to make her life a little bit easier. By making it clear that these alien hunters are openly terrible people who will screw over aliens and humans alike without remorse, Drama Queen leaves a trail of breadcrumbs leading to its true moral. But before we talk about what that is, there's a couple more details we have to talk about. So at the start of the manga, we're led to believe that Nomomoto will likely be the main character. We start the series from her point of view and learn about her actions and motivations. But as the manga continues from there, the story starts to slowly shift towards centering on Kitami instead. And along with this shift, we learn about how morally questionable Nomomoto actually is. While she originally starts out as a slightly petty but mostly understandable person, she quickly devolves into a full-on psycho, who will do pretty much anything so long as she gets to eat aliens. Over the course of the story, she ends up betraying Kitami not once but twice when she's led to believe that someone else could feed her more aliens than Kitami could. The manga makes it very overtly clear that Nomomoto is just a straight-up terrible person who follows her appetite wherever it goes. Similarly, the other two human characters that get any sort of focus, Odori and Misaki, are also shown to be awful in their own unique ways. Odori is initially on the alien side and tries to stop Kitami from killing them, but after an alien crashes their concert, she flips on a dime and encourages Kitami to continue killing them en masse. Misaki, on the other hand, is a mostly reasonable person. However, his anger towards the aliens for gouging out his eye makes it so that he can do whatever it takes to kill them, including putting innocent people in danger. If it wasn't already clear, there's pretty much nobody in this story who's morally pure. Every single human member of the cast is terrible in some sort of way. And this plays into the dark comedy aspect of the story that I was talking about earlier. These humans are all so absurdly evil in their own unique ways that the actions they're taking couldn't in any way be called justified. This proves that the series is trying to use a critique through absurdity, by showing that all the characters who are participating in the killing of aliens are so insanely evil. But if you didn't realize, there's still one character left that we haven't touched on, whose personal journey starts to become the central focus of the entire manga. And so, it's finally time to talk about the true main character, Kitami. Kitami is immediately the most morally complex character in the series. The driving factor behind his hatred of the aliens is because of the fact that one of them killed his entire family, and was let off easy because of their preferential treatment. While this anger is misguided and not morally pure, it is a lot more of a reasonable goal than anyone else in the story has. He wants to make sure that the aliens won't be able to hurt anyone else the way they hurt him. and he hopes that if he kills enough of them, they'll stop moving into their city. Unlike Nomomoto, who's enough of a psychopath that she doesn't see the aliens as people, Kitami chooses to purposefully ignore his guilt and conscience over the crimes he commits, trying to focus on the ways the aliens are hurting society and the anger he has towards them for taking his family away. But as the story continues, this resolution slowly starts to break down. He meets an alien named Lily, who starts working as the manager of the factory that Kitami is working at. And when they meet for the first time, Kitami immediately notices that Lily looks exactly like the alien that killed his family. Upon confronting him, Lily reveals that it was actually Lily's twin brother, Lally, that committed the crime. And while Kitami doesn't really believe him at first, he decides to spare Lily's life basically on a whim. Over time, Kitami and Lily get closer and closer, causing Kitami to have doubts about his convictions that all aliens were bad. But then when Kitami is at a concert trying to track down Lally, Lily appears and massacres all of the humans in the building, once again causing Kitami to doubt everything and wonder if Lily was actually responsible for the hit and run. Eventually, the two have a conversation on the beach, where Lily reveals that his younger brother Lally was actually classmates with Kitami's older sister, Soyo. After their first time meeting, Lally develops a massive crush on Soyo and tries to get closer to her over their time in school together. But Soyo gets upset over the fact that she has to go to school with an alien and ends up accusing him of SA, eventually embarrassing him in front of the entire class and driving him out of the school. With his spirits crushed, Lally ends up taking his own life in a car accident, almost killing Lily in the process. Once he wakes up from his coma, Lily kills Kitami's family in revenge for his little brother's death, but the pain from the incident still remains. So he instead goes on to try and take everything from the one surviving member of that family, Kitami himself. Lily reveals that everything he did was out of revenge for the way his brother was treated, and that his irrational anger towards humanity is because of the injustice his family suffered at their hands, seeming to echo the exact same story that Kitami has been saying this entire time. At this point, Kitami comes to realize that there are no heroes in this world. None of the humans he's been associating with have been good people, and honestly the aliens haven't been much better. But he and Lily have been committing countless atrocities against the other's race, both out of some twisted obsession with justice and revenge. And in the end, neither of them are actually good people. They're both just coming up with excuses to take their anger out on the world. And that's where the story currently stands. Kitami realizes that he's been using a sister he barely even knew to justify his endless crimes against the aliens. And at least in my opinion, this character arc basically proves that this manga was working towards a moral that's pretty much antithetical to what people accused it of. Drama Queen seems to be trying to shine light on the ways that people take their own anger and rage out on people different from them, using some arbitrary difference in moral judgment to enact countless cruelties on other people. So in essence, this story was actually working towards an anti-xenophobia message. By showing how flawed and ugly all of these characters are in their hatred of some group of others, the manga asks that we as the readers do better, that we try to work through our emotions in healthier ways that don't result in us taking them out on those around us, and to ultimately try and break the cycles of violence that we find ourselves in, and acknowledge that people are people, no matter what our histories are. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I personally think that this manga chose to tackle a very fascinating topic. I'm very interested in the psychology behind certain types of hatred and what causes people to resort to these cycles of violence. I don't necessarily think that Drama Queen handled this idea the best, but I do respect the story that it's trying to tell. And I think it's worth talking about, especially with how people initially perceived this manga. Thank you guys so much for watching.